My name is Jessica Walker, and what I'm about to share with you isn't a fairy tale. It's not even close. I wish it was something I could laugh about now, but the truth is, it nearly broke me. If anyone had told me that one decision made by someone else could flip my whole world upside down, I wouldn't have believed them. But that's exactly what happened. I was 23, fresh out of college. I had just earned my degree in journalism and I had big dreams. I wanted to work for a major media outlet, maybe start a blog, maybe even host my own podcast one day. I was ambitious, passionate, and for the first time in my life I felt like I had some control over my future. But everything changed the night my father called me into his study. Now, my father is the kind of man people don't say no to. Ex-military, self-made businessman, firm believer in doing things the old-fashioned way. Respect, obedience, tradition. That was his mantra. So when he asked to speak with me, I already had a feeling it wouldn't be a casual conversation. He was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, hands folded like he was about to deliver a business proposal. He looked at me and said, "Jessica, you've played around enough. You've gotten your degree and now it's time to settle down." I blinked. "Settle down how?" "You're going to marry Richard Carter," he said. I just stared at him thinking maybe I heard wrong. "Who's Richard Carter?" He gave me this look like I'd insulted him. "Stephen Carter's son. You've met him before. He runs their company now. He's a good man." I racked my brain and remembered Richard vaguely. Tall, sharp jawline, never smiled, the kind of guy who looked like he was always judging the room. We met twice. Once at a Christmas dinner when I was 16 and another time when I was in college and barely said 2 words to him. I told my father I didn't love him. That I didn't even know him. But he didn't care. "This isn't about love," he said like it was supposed to make sense. "This is about family. Richard is responsible. He'll take care of you. It's a good match." That was his version of love. A good match. Not feelings, not connection. Just convenience. And no matter how much I begged or reasoned or cried, his mind was made up. He had already spoken to Richard's father. The wedding was happening. I felt like I was being auctioned off. My own dreams, my goals, my independence, all of it just tossed aside so I could become someone's wife. Someone I didn't even choose. The wedding happened less than a month later. Everything was fast-tracked. It was like no one cared what I thought. I walked down that aisle in a white dress I never picked out, said vows I didn't mean, and kissed a man I didn't love. My mom smiled through tears, but I could tell she wasn't happy either. So she said nothing. Maybe because she was scared of my father, or maybe because she thought this was just how things were done. After the wedding, we moved into Richard's house. A massive, cold mansion on the outskirts of Dallas. At first, I thought maybe things would get better. Maybe he was just distant, not cruel. Maybe I could find a way to make this work. I was wrong. The Richard the first met after the wedding was not just distant, he was controlling. Cold in a way that didn't even feel human. He told me what to wear. Criticized my friends. Monitored how long I was out of the house. At first it was subtle, little comments here and there. But then it escalated. "You don't need to talk to your college friends anymore," he'd say. "They're a bad influence." Or, "You look more decent when you cover up. Try this instead." He controlled what I ate, what I watched when I went to bed. I wasn't a wife. I was property. Like a decorative piece he'd added to his home to check a box. And if I pushed back even just a little, he'd switch tones. His voice would go low, threatening. "You're mine now, Jessica. You do what I say." It was like living in a cage with invisible bars. I wasn't physically bruised, but emotionally, I was shattered. I started losing pieces of myself. My confidence, my joy, even my voice. I stopped writing. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped fighting back. I kept telling myself to hold on. That maybe he'd soften. That maybe with time he'd learn to love me, or at least treat me like a human being. But then, something happened that shattered even the little hope I had left. One evening, just a regular Thursday, Richard came home with a woman. A beautiful woman. Long curly hair, flawless skin, bold red lips. She looked like she walked straight out of a magazine. I remember standing in the living room watching them walk in like they owned the place. And Richard? He didn't even flinch. "This is Bianca," he said casually. "She'll be living with us." I was confused. Who is she? My second wife. I just stood there frozen. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. "You're not serious," I said barely above a whisper. He turned to me completely unfazed. Dead serious. She's moving in. This is my house and you'll learn to share. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But all I could do was stare at him. This man I was forced to marry, introducing another woman into our home like it was nothing. And Bianca? She just smiled sweetly like this was totally normal. That night, I locked myself in the guest bedroom and cried until my face was swollen. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how my life had turned into this. But what I didn't know was that this wasn't even the worst of it. Because what happened next would change everything. After Bianca moved in, everything changed, and not in the way I expected. I thought I'd feel more invisible, like I didn't even exist in my own home. And at first, that was true. Richard doted on her in a way he never did with me. He bought her gifts, took her out for dinner, laughed with her, things he never once tried with me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Bianca treated me like a servant. She would leave her clothes scattered around the house and tell me to pick them up. She'd make a mess in the kitchen, then complain when I didn't clean it fast enough. And every time I tried to stand up for myself, Richard would say, "Don't talk back to her. She's my wife too." My heart was screaming every day. It was like I was watching my own life from the outside, powerless, like a prisoner in someone else's nightmare. And every day I told myself, just survive one more day. One more day. One more week. One more month. But then something strange started happening. Late at night, I'd hear whispers downstairs. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe I was losing my mind. But then I started staying up just to listen. Richard and Bianca would sit in his study with the door half closed, talking in hushed voices. I couldn't make out much, but one word kept standing out: money. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I crept down the stairs, barefoot, quiet as a shadow, and peeked through the crack in the study door. I saw Bianca with a laptop open and Richard flipping through a stack of papers. There were piles of cash on the table. Not just hundreds, thousands. And some of the papers, they had my name on them. I felt a chill run down my spine. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. My mind was racing. What were they doing with my name? Why were there documents with my signature, when I hadn't signed anything? The next day, when Richard left the house and Bianca went to the spa, I took a risk. I snuck into the study and went through the desk drawers. My hands were shaking the whole time. But then I found it. A folder stuffed in the back of the drawer with my name printed on the tab. Inside were property documents, bank statements, and transfer slips. They were transferring money from my trust fund, money my grandfather left me before he died, into a company I'd never heard of. And every single transfer had my forged signature on it. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't just a prisoner. I was a target. They were stealing from me, using me, and planning to leave me with nothing. I stared at the documents for what felt like hours. My stomach turned. My hands were sweating. I felt this fire rise up in me that I hadn't felt in a long time, not since before the wedding. I wasn't going to cry this time. I wasn't going to beg. No. This time I was going to fight back. I carefully took photos of every document with my phone. Every page. Every detail. I even started secretly recording conversations. I bought a tiny recording device online and hid it under the bookshelf in the study. Over the next 2 weeks I collected everything. Audio of Richard talking about hiding money, Bianca laughing about how stupid I was, how easy it was to take what they wanted. But just when I thought I had enough, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. I had been wondering about Bianca for a while. Something about her seemed off. Her smile was too perfect, her charm too forced. One night while she was asleep, I took her wallet from the kitchen counter and checked her ID. And that's when I saw it. Her real name wasn't Bianca Carter. It was Rachel Douglas. I took a photo of the ID and ran her name through a public records search. What I found sent shivers down my spine. Rachel Douglas had a criminal record in 2 states. Fraud. Identity theft. She and Richard had been involved in multiple scams over the years. Real estate fraud, investment scams, even blackmail. And every time they changed names, changed stories, and started over. I was their latest scheme. I wasn't a wife. I was a tool. A means to an end. And I knew deep down that when they were done bleeding me dry, they'd discard me. Maybe even worse. That night I called the only person I could trust. My college best friend, Ava. She worked in the FBI's financial crimes unit. We hadn't talked in months because of Richard, but the second she picked up the phone and heard my voice, she said, "Jess, What's wrong? I told her everything. I sent her the documents, the recordings, the photos. I didn't even have to ask. He jumped into action. What came next happened so fast I barely had time to catch my breath. But I'll never forget the moment it all exploded. Because justice was finally on its way. I didn't sleep the night Ava called me back. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. He told me they were moving fast. That what I had uncovered wasn't just fraud. It was part of an ongoing investigation into multiple financial crime rings. Richard and Bianca, or should I say Rachel, had been on the FBI's radar before, but there was never enough evidence to nail them. Till now. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. I had to pretend everything was normal, like I didn't know a thing. I still smiled at Bianca when she tossed her coat at me like I was her maid. I still nodded at Richard when he reminded me not to embarrass him at an upcoming dinner with some fake investors. Every time they turned their backs, I clenched my fists and counted to 10 just to keep from screaming. But deep inside I was counting down. Because Ava said it was only a matter of time. 3 days later it happened. It was a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen stirring oatmeal I didn't even want when I heard the knock. It wasn't a gentle knock. It was the kind that made the whole house stop breathing. Richard looked up from his phone. Who the hell is that? Bianca walked out of the bathroom, robe half open, and rolled her eyes. Probably delivery. But it wasn't delivery. It was a swarm. FBI. Local police. Financial crimes unit. I watched from the kitchen window as a sea of black jackets poured into our driveway like a storm. Richard stood frozen for a second, then bolted toward the back door. But before he could even touch the handle, he was tackled. Right there on the tile floor, face first. Shouting. Handcuffs. Bianca screamed. She tried to run up the stairs, but an agent cut her off. Another tackled her. Her wig slipped off. She shrieked like a wild animal, spitting, kicking, suddenly not so graceful. Me. I just stood there. So calm. Watching. One of the agents, a tall woman with a badge that read Agent Monroe, walked over to me gently. She smiled. Jessica Walker? I nodded slowly. You're safe now, she said. You did the right thing. They spent hours tearing the house apart. Computers, documents, flash drives, money hidden behind fake drawers. Apparently, Bianca had been using the name Rachel Douglas in Arizona too, and there was a warrant out for her arrest in connection to a real estate Ponzi scheme. Richard had been laundering money through fake charities, and the company he claimed to be running? Totally bogus. Everything about them was a lie. I sat on the front steps, wrapped in a blanket someone had handed me, watching as the life I never wanted burned to the ground. I should have been angry. Or sad. Or traumatized. But honestly, I felt free. 2 weeks later I was granted an annulment. Not just a divorce, an annulment. Like it never happened. Every account they opened in my name was shut down. Every dollar they stole was traced. Ava told me I'd likely recover most of my trust fund. But the money didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was that I survived. I moved out of that cold mansion and into a small apartment near downtown Austin. Nothing fancy. Just a space that felt like mine. I hung up pictures I loved. I bought a little cactus for the kitchen window. I opened my laptop and started writing again. It wasn't easy rebuilding myself. There were days I woke up feeling like I couldn't breathe. I still had nightmares sometimes. Still flinched when I heard loud knocking. But I was healing. One night, months later, I was sipping tea and scrolling through job listings when I saw an ad, seeking podcast hosts for true crime series. I laughed out loud. Then I paused. Why not? I applied. A week later I got the job. Now I tell stories, real stories, about women who've survived the unimaginable. Stories of betrayal, survival, justice. Stories like mine. And every time I sit in front of that mic and speak my truth, I remember that girl who once thought her voice was gone forever. But she wasn't gone. She was just waiting. Waiting for the moment to rise. And when she did, she didn't just survive. She transformed.